Some players can spend a lifetime trying to play higher, but here's the thing, most could do it in 5 minutes. Let's start with the problem as I see it, the aperture. As a general rule, to play high, you need a small aperture. But what does that actually mean? Well, think about the strings on a piano. The higher notes have shorter strings. On the trumpet, higher notes need a smaller aperture. We know other things are in play. High tongue, air compression, to name just two. Just like the high note strings on the piano are thinner and under greater tension. But we have to start somewhere. The aperture is the place to start. Leave everything else until later. Okay, make an aperture about this size and blow through it really fast. Now this one. And finally, this one. Did you feel the tension increase in your face? Except for extreme high notes, actually forming a small aperture is quite easy. But to blow through it and create sound, that requires tension. And the smaller the aperture gets, the more tension it needs. That's why the common approach is to focus on developing a stronger embouchure to create tension. Compression training, isometric strengthening, lip buzzing, mouthpiece buzzing, all of those things are to develop strength. The more strength you have, the more tension you can create, the smaller the aperture gets, and the higher the note. But does that sound efficient to you? Do you think that's the way to play effortlessly? What if there was another way? A way to play with the smallest possible aperture and almost no facial tension. I was having a drink with a friend of mine after work a few weeks ago. Now, he's a top London pro, very experienced teacher. And he was saying that although he's always had solid C's and D's, he's never really felt comfortable beyond that. Now, physiologically, I could see that he should be able to play much, much higher if he used what he had naturally. And this is the key thing, using what you have naturally. We had a quick chat, and a few days later, he sent me this.
After having 1 pint and some crisps with Paul Mays.
That's a Super C, and it's a pretty impressive Super C. Improving your upper register is as much a mental game as it is a physical one, and the way you think will really affect your approach. So, 2 tips to begin with. Tip 1, don't try to turn a big aperture into a small aperture. Start with a small aperture and work from there. Tip 2, think frequency, not pitch, frequency. This one is really important. Frequency is measured in hertz or vibrations per second. We'll use hertz because it's the technical term and it's also less of a mouthful. A lip speed of 233 hertz will give you a low C. 466 hertz a middle C, and 932 hertz gets you a high C. Faster vibration equals higher notes. Higher notes equal more hertz. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, I know this. I've always thought the higher I go, the more it hurts. And if that is the case, then you're not alone. And if it makes you feel any better, I remember those days too. I remember them very well. So why think in terms of frequency and not pitch? Well, if you think in terms of pitch, a low C to a middle C is an octave. A middle C to a high C is an octave. Think in terms of frequency and you realize that not all octaves are the same. The difference in lip speed between a low C and a middle C is 233 hertz. The difference between a middle C and a high C is 466 hertz, twice as much lip speed. So, tip number 3, don't try to play higher by trying to play higher. Instead, do something that will make your lips move faster. Our mystery player's Super C or double high C at 1864 hertz is an extremely high pitch, but in terms of frequency, it's not high at all. In nature, we see bats and dolphins emit frequencies of over 100,000 hertz. They're not just playing double high Cs, they're playing octuple high Cs. I'll play you one. So you can see a double high C doesn't even come close. Actually, bats are the big hitters. They can emit frequencies over 200,000 hertz. But dolphins produce their sound in a very similar way to brass players. I won't go into that now, but it's fascinating what we can learn from nature. High frequency sound is generally considered to start at 2,000 hertz. So to join the real high frequency club, Mystery Trumpet Guy would need to find an extra few hundred hertz. I was about to tell him when he sent me this. That's lovely playing. He also finishes on an F above double high C. That's 2,489 hertz. That's after a 5-minute chat. Batman didn't try to play high. He activated a mechanism built using what he has naturally. The mechanism, it's been there his whole life, he just didn't realize it. It makes his lips move faster with less tension. It's the same mechanism which gives me my facility. It's also the same mechanism which I believe fundamentally gives all great high note trumpet players their range and their efficiency. I call it the high frequency aperture mechanism, HFA for short. An HFA mechanism works like a turbo in an engine. Turbochargers give engines more power, better efficiency, much greater speed. The HFA basically does that to the lips. It's a second aperture which can regulate and turbocharge frequency. And most of you have one. Here's a double G at about 1400 hertz. Now, watch my face as I get higher. There's no sign of tension because except for the muscles around my chin, there is no tension. The turbo is kicked in and I'm getting maximum TLR. More hertz for less hertz. I'm guessing you'd need to create an aperture about 2 to 3 millimeters for that note. Watch what happens if I do that with my lips. But with HFA, I can even do this. Absolutely no cheek or top lip tension. A conventional trumpet aperture has two jobs. One, to create sound, and two, to change pitch. So on the one hand, we're trying to create more tension, and on the other hand, we're trying to relax more to be more efficient. So I developed and use a 2 aperture system. I call it the Maze double aperture system, MDAS for short. One aperture produces sound, one aperture changes frequency. Look at my lip shape on a high C. What you are seeing here is my sound aperture, and notice how wide and relaxed it is. That's because it has nothing to do with the frequency of the high note. Its job is simply to produce sound. Notice how my lips are not quite touching. I blow the lips closed. Tip number 4, blow the lips closed. Don't blow the lips open. I remember spending so much time copying the way the great players looked, thinking that maybe one day, miraculously, I would end up playing like them. But of course that never happened. Why? Because unless you look under the bonnet, under the hood, you can't even see the engine, never mind understand it. Let's have a look at my high frequency aperture, my HFA. So here you can see my second aperture. I'm simply using what I have naturally to form a very small aperture. The irregular shape of my upper teeth forms the top of the aperture and my lower lip forms the rest. Here's a graphic of my top teeth and lower lip. You can clearly see the top of the aperture and how it's naturally very small. And the best thing is, it doesn't need any tension from me to stay that way. The lower half is regulated by the very flexible lower lip, which opens the space to play low and closes the space to play high. So a conventional aperture works by reducing the size of the vibration. MDAS works by reducing the size of the airstream, because my sound aperture will only vibrate the same size as the airstream that hits it. So a thick airstream will give you a wide vibration and a thin airstream will give a small vibration. The shape of the aperture doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be in the middle. The only thing it needs is the potential to be very, very small. So if I go back to the aperture test we did earlier and blow through this aperture really, really fast, most of my face remained totally relaxed. Hertz without hurt. 100% TLR, 100% resonance. I'm using what I have naturally. Have a look at my students. They're also using what they have naturally. Well done. Well done, that's great. To look at them, you'd be forgiven for thinking they're all playing in a completely different way. But they're not. They're all using MDAS. You just can't see it. And they've all used the same methods to develop and control it. The only difference is their HFA, their high frequency aperture, is unique to them because it's been built around what they have naturally. So they're all natural players. Most of you, not all of you, but most of you will have something you can use naturally. And now you know how most of you, not all, but most of you with MDAS could play effortless high notes in just 5 minutes. My teaching starts with what a player has naturally, trying to use that as much as possible, even if it's only 10%. It's got to be better than using tension in the face. If you don't have an HFA, a high frequency aperture, don't worry. There are other ways you can get those lips moving faster. I'll talk about my other systems another time. So, what do you have naturally? More importantly, are you using it? If you're interested in having a lesson with me, I offer lessons online or in person, one-to-one, if you're in the UK. I also offer lots of different lesson options, so do get in touch on the email below. That's what I'm here for, to help you to play better. That's why I started the Trumpet Prof channel. Hope you enjoyed today's video. I'm Paul Mays. See you next time.